Hold up. What am I witnessing right here? Who are these people? What is this sound? You know what? Look. All right. My interest has been piqued. I gotta put in my monitors. What is this? What? I was not prepared. All right, let's see if these things are connected.
What have they done to the old home place? Why did they tear it down?
People would come from far away, they dance all night till the break of day. When they called her a hollering, Josie Doe,
Bill Monroe.
the Uncle Pin was ready to go. Hey, at about sundown, how the hill is above town.
Yeah, I'm really interested to find out about the nasal sound. When I first heard this music, obviously, well, maybe not so obviously, that stood out. The first time I heard it, I'm thinking, that person, right, has a pretty high nasally thing going on. Nothing wrong with it, just a different approach. It certainly stood out. And then as I listened a little bit more, it became very clear that this was very purposeful, so it must have some meaning. I'm guessing this is a feature that is very prominent in the music. Of course, I could be completely and totally wrong. I usually am. That happens when you're learning.
If it a hound to bring, you can hear it talk, you can hear it sing.
Bluegrass music didn't have to happen. It wasn't destined to be. It just so happened that most of the Scots-Irish people that emigrated to the United States came to the Appalachian region. They had the Celtic music that they remembered from home, but this was the folk music. It was the music that the folks in the Appalachian region played.
What's really interesting to me here is, all of it is, I look at some of these pictures, early settlers to this region. Obviously, they brought over their music along with food and everything else. And the thing that comes to mind is that these people were in a new land, a new home. And I imagine that this music, the music they brought with them, the music that ultimately became bluegrass music, had to have been a source of great comfort, and that tie to the homeland. I'm really interested to find out about the banjo, right? Being an African instrument, and how the banjo found its way up into Appalachia, and how did the banjo become a part of this music?
That was such a creative part of American culture, how that was coming into being, with Irish and Scottish immigrants coming in, bringing instruments, bringing songs, bringing their broken heart from leaving their families, hundreds of miles, thousands of miles away sometimes. When I dissect the music, look at it and take it from a scientific place, you can see the immigrant crossing, coming into the hills, and African Americans coming up the rivers from the south with banjos.
The songs that were written back in those days, they were written about, they were tragic songs.
Bobby Osborne. Now, I'm really feeling the hat. Again, this whole theme of just looking your very best. A lot of thought went into the presentation. Look at this elderly gentleman here, sharp as a butcher's knife. I'm feeling the hat, the tie, very debonair. Yeah, what's that all about? Bobby Osborne, is he somebody I should know? Is he somebody I should key in on?
They were about people that had lost their life in coal mines and cutting logs of timber out of mountains and things like that.
I have no promise of tomorrow.
The bluegrass approach has always been one of the most genuine that I've ever heard. Not that others are not, but it came from a place, a demographic. You weren't trained to do that. What you felt was just as raw, and how you were expressing that was just as genuine as picking up a handful of that precious dirt that you planted your taters and corn in. You know, it was just that precious.
Why did the camp seem so lonely? And why were they feeling so strange?
Bluegrass music is a really unique expression of the American spirit, I think. It expresses, you know, the Southern ties to the land. It was born out of hard times. It was born out of the moment when, you know, industrialization really kind of transformed the Southern way of life.
I think the music comes from a very real place. It kept people together. It made them happy when they were sad. It spoke to people that had left them or who had gone to the cities to work and, left people behind. These are real struggles of real people.
One of those young men leaving the country for the city was William Smith Monroe. Born on September 13, 1911, he was the youngest of 8 children of James and Melissa Monroe, who lived on a farm near the small western Kentucky town.
I'm assuming that was Monroe's childhood home. And maybe it's preserved now as a museum or something.
In the country for the city was William Smith Monroe. Born on September 13, 1911, he was the youngest of 8 children of James and Melissa Monroe, who lived on a farm near the small western Kentucky town of Rosine. Rosine is hundreds of miles west of the Appalachian Mountains, but Bill Monroe grew up surrounded by old-time church music and mountain fiddle tunes, the kind of music that laid the foundation for what would become country and bluegrass.
His mother played the fiddle and accordion and sang. He had an uncle, Pendleton Vandiver, who was very influential in terms of bringing the music to him. And when he was young, they gave him a mandolin that only had 4 strings because they thought he was making too much noise. He responded to, being kind of put off on the side with an instrument that wasn't thought of as being as prestigious as the fiddle by developing really impressive technique in playing. Speed, he was really good. And he was in a context in which there was a lot of what we now think of or call old-time music being performed. Dances, social visits of one sort or another. And it was a situation in which he being the youngest, he lived a somewhat solitary life in that sense.
Melissa Monroe died when Bill was 10. He began spending more and more time with her brother, Pendleton Vandiver. Uncle Pen, as the Monroe children called him, was renowned.
Okay. In my comments the other night, I think it was Angie Day who mentioned that my most recent post, Uncle Pen, was a real-life character, and now I'm finding out an actual uncle on his mother's side, Bill Monroe's mother's side, who I guess was a mentor to young Bill. So this is Uncle Pen. Like the mustache.
In the region as an old-time fiddler. Monroe would later describe the sweet sound in a song.
Oh, the people would come from far away. They danced all night till the break of day. When the caller hollered, do-si-do, you knew Uncle Pen was ready to go. Late in the evening about sundown, high on the hill of the town, Uncle Pen played the fiddle, Lord, how it would ring. You could hear it talk, you could hear it sing.
By the time Bill's father died in 1928, Bill was Uncle Pen's full-time musical protege. He spent his teen years learning from a wide variety of musicians, including the area's #1 music man, a blues guitarist named Arnold Schultz.
Arnold Schultz. Very interesting stuff here.